Growing up an inner city youth, I was considered at risk. And like most children in those communities, my parents, who loved me dearly, were always at work because they had to in order to make ends meet at the end of the month. So I grew up on two streets in Savannah, Georgia, Martin Luther King Boulevard and East Anderson Street. On one street, I had a paternal grandmother, a businesswoman that made her store the family hangout. My uncles, aunts, and cousins were always around, and they were very active participants in the American Civil Rights Movement. On the other street, I had a God-fearing maternal grandmother that often expressed her love and instilled her faith in me. However, this street was one of warfare. Life on East Anderson Street imprinted social, emotional, and physical combat into my disposition. I was physically and emotionally assaulted by my aunts, uncles, and cousins, often to the point that I had to fight in order to survive. So fighting became a means of survival at a very young age, and it was the norm for that side of the family and in that community. I spent most of my time growing up on East Anderson Street. I was a very shy child with low self-esteem. I didn't talk much, hoping not to draw attention to myself because I knew if I did, a punch, a slap, or a name calling would follow. I've been called ugly, hot, fast, meaning sexually promiscuous, bump, referring to my top lip negatively. I would be cursed out for no reason. It was even predicted by my aunt that I would be pregnant by 14 years old. These were not the acts of strangers. This was my own family. I loved school. For one, it was an escape from East Anderson Street, and I loved learning. But I can remember as early as kindergarten going to school and feeling pity for not knowing what the other kids knew. And in the early years of primary school, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, I don't feel that was entirely true. I was a shy child with an inadequate vocabulary to effectively communicate what I knew, but my comprehension was very good. However, my reading and writing suffered, and there was no one in the classroom willing to help me. And the non-verbal communication I received was that I was inadequate or unable to do more. So I developed low self-esteem on all sides, at home and at school. And my parents loved me deeply, but they didn't know how to help me at school. And for the most part, they were unaware of the extent of the physical and emotional abuse I was experiencing because they were always at work. It would get so bad on occasions that I would have to call my paternal grandmother that would come and medevac me out of the war zone and watch over me until my parents got off, and they would hear about those events and would address it, of course. But ultimately, they were unable to protect me from it. And it wasn't just at home. It seemed like the more I tried to make myself invisible, the more I stood out. I remember being cut on the back of my neck with a razor blade by a female student. It had to be like third or fourth grade. And it was because she didn't like how I looked. I would get into so many fistfights at school due to physical and verbal bullying, which affected how I dressed, how I carried myself. And for the most part, I dressed and behaved much like a tomboy. I was placed into the Specific Learning Disability Program, SLD, in 1994 at the conclusion of fifth grade, which I understood the acronym to stand for Slow Learning Disability because that's what all the kids and the adults told me it was. It's only recently that I came into the understanding that SOD stands for specific learning disability. So now I had the additional unwanted attention and was bullied at home and school for having a slow learning disability, being an ugly, black, stupid girl. But in 1995, I stumbled upon a diamond in the rough, which revolutionized the dead end path I was on. St. Pius Community Center was my diamond in the rough, and dance and performing arts became my voice in saving grace. St. Pius was located on East Anderson Street, just 2 blocks from my war zone, and they offer various cultural enrichment programs for the youth that lived in that community. In that same year, Tanya Sherman, she started a professional dance company that was housed at the community center, St. Pius, which became my safe zone, and dance became my voice. I'm not the best technical dancer there ever was, but you cannot deny the truth. I communicated through dance. Dance gave me the freedom to speak freely, cry openly, and love myself deeply. And through that came healing. I changed my entire look, the way I dressed, carried myself. No more tomboy fight gear. I grew my hair out. I still had to face the war zone at home and school, so emotionally I still struggled, and teachers were still not teaching me, even more so now that I had the label as having a specific learning disability. But for the first time, I started to like myself and see new possibilities and options in my future that no one even contemplated for me. In every heroic story, the hero faces their biggest test, where even the audience is gasping and praying that they come out victorious. And there I was, 7th or 8th grade, I can't remember, but I can remember the event like it was yesterday. Within a year of auditioning for the dance company that was housed at St. Pius Community Center, I graduated from an apprentice dancer to a professional dancer, which means I toured with the company. We were doing countless community events, and we were always in the newspaper. I was feeling really good about myself and my accomplishments. What I had not anticipated was how the exposure would make me an even bigger target at school. And I can't remember why all the students were gathered in the gymnasium that day. And normally I would wear my hair pulled back in a classical bun, but this day I decided to wear my hair pressed and loose. And I remember entering the gymnasium, walking all the way to the back, far left, and there was a group of girls that was sitting the middle of the gymnasium. And they normally gathered together or congregated together, but I knew the ringleader did not like me, and she was often verbally abusive toward me. I saw them looking at me and talking, so I knew they were talking about me. However, I wasn't alarmed until they started migrating in my direction. I was at such a good place mentally. I had mastered ignoring the bullies and the negative comments, and I didn't want to fight anymore. I was just over the constant hostility and negativity. But they kept inching closer. And so I decided to start moving toward the front of the gymnasium, and a group of students that was stalking me like a hawk was now pursuing me on foot. It was 5 against 1. There was only one way out of this for me. I felt so abandoned. I ran all the way to the front of the gymnasium where no teacher could be found. I shouted for help as a group of boys blocked the exit. And in that moment, I had no choice but to dust off the Black Panther starter jacket I had retired, along with all of my tomboy attire, ball up my fists, and get ready to survive. There was so much adrenaline running through my veins. I was so laser focused on surviving that I lost sense of all sound. But I understood their objective very clearly as I read their lips. You think you pretty because you have long hair? You in newspapers now. Bitch, you ain't shit. I shuffled back and forth, circling the gymnasium, trying to delay the assault. But there was no teacher, no chaperone in sight, and I, once again, had to save myself. And they pounced all at once. I became unhinged like an untamed lion that saw only blood. And I can't remember a time before or after that event where I felt such sadness, abandonment, hopelessness, anger, rage, frustration, all at once. And what was to come will only compound those emotions. The gymnasium erupted into chaos, and I can only imagine it was the shouting and the explosive eruption in the gymnasium which drew the attention of the teachers. And I must have looked as unhinged as I felt because the football coach that was 300 pounds of muscle and the second male teacher grabbed me with no one restraining the other girls. And in that moment, one of the girls was able to grab my hair and secure a fistful as her trophy. It was so bad, the police were called. And I, along with only one of the other girls, was arrested, put into handcuffs, and thrown into juvenile jail after being stripped naked and searched. I just couldn't get my head wrapped around it. The only thing I did was survive, and I was being treated like a criminal. My parents were able to pick me up the next day, but that incident would go on to public record, adding yet another label behind my name: juvenile delinquent. But my paternal grandmother was not having it. The next day began a long battle between the middle school I attended, the school system, and the juvenile police department, along with my civil rights fighting grandmother and parents. The event was eventually expunged from my record, but too often, at-risk youth find themselves in survival situations and must act in order to withstand what's being thrown at them and is punished for it. I didn't ask to be targeted. I didn't leave myself unsupervised. But I am the one that ends up behind bars with a record. Where is the justice in that? And I wish my story was unique in that children of color didn't find themselves in situations like this over and over and over again. Many have their freedom taken, education denied, and forced down a path that delivers our girls to public assistance and our boys to unemployment and incarceration. This is what was expected of me. You know, some events in life you just never get over or forget. But the big test that was supposed to destroy me only motivated me to dream bigger, perform more, and reach beyond my community because I felt like a misfit. I was finally finding my voice through dance, and I did not want to lose it. And from that point on, life began to get consistently better for me. Now, I was still in the SLD program, and my reading and writing still struggled, but due to my accelerated growth in dance, I was able to audition for performing arts high school, which exposed me to a variety of different lifestyles. It was amazing. And for the first time in my academic career, I felt like I belonged. I had friends that liked me. And although I wasn't the most popular girl at school, I was well known. And it wasn't met with jealousy or hatred or malice. At my performing arts high school, we had declared majors, which was dance for me. I completed all of my requirements for my program within 2 years. And I picked up an interest in film and television in high school. My future was starting to look really bright, but I still had this big thorn in my side, which was the SLD program. So as I was approaching my 10th grade year, I decided to give up my lunch periods to go to the library and read encyclopedias. Now, understand, I was reading on the 5th grade level in 10th grade, barely. So when I say I would read encyclopedias, what I really mean is I would sound out as many words as I could and try to comprehend as much as I could. All I knew was encyclopedias have a lot of words in them, so I'm just going to try to read as much as I possibly can. And I stayed committed to that plan for an entire year. And at the end of my 10th grade, I tested out of the SLD program. The SLD program for students is wonderful. If you have a neurobiological disability, which I didn't have, I had trauma, I had isolation, I had teachers that were teaching, they just weren't teaching me. I proved there was no such neurological disability when I tested out of the program, not due to tutoring or educational resources provided. I tested out of the SLD program through a self-study program I designed. I literally had to stumble my way through the educational system because at 5, 10, 13 years old, I was shoved in a corner and left with the responsibility of teaching myself. However, I was able to graduate high school with honors and receive a Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree in film television from Savannah College of Art and Design under a dance scholarship, and a Doctor of Physical Therapy degree from Baylor University. As an adult, I now understand the importance of a quality education. And as a healthcare provider, I am reminded every day of how closely linked education is to health through the patients that are able to afford my services and the ones that are not. So, what's next? I am fortunate to have overcome a lot of the early challenges in my life. However, it doesn't go unnoticed that there were pivotal events, people, opportunities, which led to exposures that created new possibilities for me to become a doctor of physical therapy. Therefore, I would like to create a charitable organization that provides therapeutic activities, rehabilitation, and prevention services to those that would otherwise not have access or be able to afford it. One of the organization's social and cultural missions will be to provide opportunities of exposure for the youth and the young adults within underserved communities to the various healthcare professions with the goal of increasing diversity and inclusion within subsets of healthcare. It still amazes me to this day that I wasn't aware that physical therapy was a career path for myself until I ventured into health and fitness as a personal trainer. It's hard to become what you cannot see or even know exists as a possibility for yourself. My journey has allowed me to develop various skill sets that opens the door to innovative and creative ways for the organization to accomplish its mission. Now that I have a way to give back, I am excited about creating an avenue to use my artsy background to help people help themselves and their loved ones improve their quality of life and functional mobility. But if the question is, what's next? To be continued.